all the things that make us human that people are avoiding are the very things that are going to keep us together in the long run if we remember who we are. Everybody's off on how much money they think that you have. They don't know. And everybody that got up and, clapped before I went to speak, they don't know what car I drive. They don't know what house I live in. They don't know this cabin exists. They don't know anything that is the measurements of my net worth other than the impact of my book. Because I'm not on social media posting that much about like my actual life. Like there's no pictures of my home. There's no pictures of my vehicles. There's none of that. Like that's not what I'm bought into, because it's not really like the thing that matters. Like this cabin matters. It is grandiose. It is nice overall, but it matters because of the connections that happen here and the conversations. This is a catalyst of a place because it creates satiating conversations and experiences. We can walk the river and have a conversation that we can't have in the city. We can go up in the lab and sit around a round table and have a latte and have that conversation. We can do other things that are super deep and meaningful while we're up here at the cabin, So I realized that this wasn't an investment in a traditional sense. Like people right now when they're responding to these book posts that I'm doing to kind of get it out there, like, hey man, I'm inspired about this. I'm like, hey, the cabin calls. Like this is my place to have an excuse. It's the reason that Corey and I became business partners, because when I was like, oh, you're into this, this, and this, come to the cabin. We're gonna do Canadian cabin, and then now we do a project when we're here, and now we listen to music and introduce each other to that. We build a deck. We whatever it might be. It's just a place where there's play, and there's no room for play in linear thinking, because play says it's time away from the hike, so you can't get there when you're away from the hike. It's even like the tortoise and the hare story. The hare takes a break here and there, and then he can speed back up. Like, no, the tortoise that is super slow beats the hare, because the tortoise never plays. They just stay in the grind and the work and slowly get there, because if you wait for 30 years and compound your interest, then you're gonna win the race. I mean, I'm like, no, what if you just speed for a day, you like run, and then you're like, I'm just gonna hang out with my family the next day. Like, who made the rules of retirement or of the work week? The work week came because of an industrial age. And when we were in an industrial age, you needed a couple days off so you didn't die, right? And you kind of needed to have physical labor to make things happen instead of actually having an emotional intelligence. And we're still stuck in the industrial age mentally, even though we're now in a transformational age where ideas matter most, connection is what we're most starved for, and even artificial intelligence can never replace connection. Sure, we can have the metaverse and people can have a slight feeling of having connection to some AI at this point, but you know what AI is never gonna really figure out well? Mistakes and quirks and play. So all the things that make us human that people are avoiding are the very things that are going to keep us together in the long run if we remember who we are. Did that answer your question?
Yes. So there's relationship capital, mental capital. Is there anything else?
There's soulful capital. We don't really talk much about that, but like your soul purpose, like the capital of who you are when you listen to your intuition and remember who you are and that you know your purpose. Like there's the capital in that is like that you're more fully expressed, that you're more comfortable in your own skin, that you're just basically unapologetic about being you. You're not in this notion of like having to do everything for everyone else. And the thing that makes the shift that's hard is you have to be more self-aware to take care of yourself and not jump to the conclusion of sacrificing for everyone else. Because another narrative that the world gives us is like, hey, everything that's going bad in the world, you should feel bad about it and you should do something about it. And you should do that at the expense of time with your family. And you should do that at the expense, you shouldn't be playing, because playing's irresponsible when there's war going on. Well, guess what? There's a million problems going on outside this driveway, and none of them are our responsibility, because if we actually could solve some of them, we would just create more entitlement and we'd prolong the lesson for people who haven't chosen to take responsibility in their own life. That's not a calloused viewpoint. The compassion is we love them, but we show them in an example of our own life how to be responsible, expressed, and free, not to be reliant upon someone else saving us, because that's when people get into the neediness of like the government better step in and the government better. But who's the government other than people that are now being forced to do something that they didn't want to do in the first place?
Any other questions while Garrett's on a roll?
I think we just got to redefine investing.
Garrett, I'm going to say one other thing, and you can go off on it if you want.
He's like, as if you need to give me permission.
One thing that I've articulated quite a bit is ROR. A lot of times people think of it as rate of return or return on risk. And what's funny to me is that one little metric determines what people do with their money, what they do with their life, what they are basing their future off of this rate of return. And so if you redefine ROR as return on result, and you get ultra clear on results, which is maybe a little too caught up in outcomes, that can give us permission to say, oh, I want this result, so I'm going to invest my relationship capital, mental capital, I'm going to invest my soul purpose capital. I'm going to get really clear on how my time, relationships, resources are going to go get a result.
I like that you're considering time in that, and you're considering because there's a lot of people that go, oh, I can earn more in real estate. And I just talked to a buddy of mine that was in baby bathwater with me, and he sold a business, so he had this real estate investment that he did, and they made a lot of money on the real estate investment. He goes, but then I calculated how much time I spent on this, and he goes, it's the least I've made in years, and it was the least enjoyable work that I did. So the fact that you're taking that into consideration.
So wealth for me, I define it slightly different. It's time, it's relationships, it's talents, which very much is like mental capital for you, and then it's resources, because the resources that we have, I believe, do matter, and the decision you might make may change if you have no money versus $2 million.
I think that in whatever calculator we have, there's like a place where it's the non-linear factors that people rate. I just think that even if we got 2% lower return over here, it's 100% more valuable to me. And this is the hard thing about soul purpose that I didn't know when I wrote Killing Sacred Cows. I kind of knew it, but it's like, if you really live your soul purpose, it may be a life with less money than not living your soul purpose, because you may simply go, this is what matters most to me. And
that's still profit, but it's like not necessarily in dollars.
It's different profit. Yeah, that's a great point. It's a different profit. But it's hard. Like, money is so measurable, and we still think that we're playing a game of basketball and money, like who has the highest score, as if that's what wins the game. But it's not, because if we lose who we are in the pursuit of that money, we've lost the game already. And even if we end up with the most, dude, I'm telling you, Corey watched the David Letterman My Next Guest with Will Smith. Yeah. He flat out used the words. He goes, I won the game and lost at life. Because he's talking about and this is before the slap. This is before he wins the Oscar that night. But he was just like, no matter how big the movie was, and even if it broke box office records, he was still like, we could have done more. And that more disease, like, I wonder if I should watch that to find the title. Like, because he probably says something unintentionally. Because when he said it, I was like, dude, this is the epitome of everything in the book. So, but relationship capital is the thing that will create the richness that's the least measurable, but the most fulfilling. Like, how do you measure the value of a relationship? It reminds me of like the last Avengers, where his daughter would always say, I love you 3,000, right? Because it's just as big a number as she could kind of think. And we know how, that's ridiculous, but that's how adults are. I love you this net worth. Am I lovable now? Because it's like somehow we think that's the mark of a man.
Does soul purpose trump relationship capital or mental capital? Because it feels like it's more important than...
It's actually the combination of the two, congruent with who you are. So what happens is there's relationship capital that the best thing you could do is love it from a distance. It goes to the very simple friends, friendlies, and buddies. So friends, you invite, you say yes, you do business. Friendlies, you say no politely, you don't get caught in the drama, you don't try to change them. And buddies are just people like, it's great to hang out with them. You're not sharing your vision with them though. But it's cool to go have a beer, but they're not going to understand when you're like, hey, I have this big vision of what I want to do. And it's just like, cool, you want to fish? I mean, whatever it is, And so it's like, it's just understanding what relationship capital you're dealing with, and how much relationship capital you can truly handle. Like, there's a certain point where having too many relationships minimizes the value of other relationships if they're not managed in a one-to-many situation. So for me, it's like, self is the most important, because if I'm not like cool with who I am and love myself and doing that inner work, then I have nothing really to give. Like Corey's seen me when I'm not in a good place because I'm struggling with that. It's not an inspiring moment. It's not feeling great. Then there's family. So I feel like family is the next thing that to really invest in and spend the time with and take care of. And it's easy for people to skip that step and go to tribe or to community because tribe and community can pay you money. And the worst is the people that go, I'm going to go straight to changing the world and forget everything else. And what they do is even if they make a dent in the world, they lose at life because their family feels neglected. And here's the thing, if you listen to the stories of these icons and the damage they've done by spending zero time with their kids, never telling their kids that they love them, never being at anything their kids do, their kids are living a hollow, hard, difficult, shallow, scared, frustrated because they never got that love.
And what's the generational cost of that?
And so what's the impact and the ramifications and ripple effects? Because we're skipping family. And then if you go self, family, then tribe. So my goal is only one-on-one with self, family, and tribe. That's my one-on-one time. Community, one to many, and world, I don't worry about. The world is not my world. It's not my problem. There's almost 8 billion people here. And this is a world of cause and effect and duality and karma that it's not mine to fix. It's one thing to get information. It's another to watch it in action. Wealth Labs gives you that lab feel. You're like, oh, this isn't it right here where something's being cooked up in the financial world, in prosperity, in dissecting what's actually going on. So if you enjoy these conversations and these teachings, well, click onto another video and drop right in for another Wealth Labs episode.